Allie with Potomac Beads. Join me as I do Melanie de Miguel's Hubble stitch with a little bit of a twist. I'm going to be teaching the Hubble stitch. You can check out the links to her books down below in the description in the video if you want to check out the Hubble stitch and get hubbling, as they call it. I'm going to be doing the Hubble stitch, showing you how to do it as a 2-drop Hubble. We're going to start with 1 and then go to 2-drop along with some multi-hold beads. So we're going to be going with RounDuo Minis. Gather up your materials and let's do the Hubble. So Melanie's Hubble stitch is a creation of the use of herringbone and right angle weave stitch. It may have been used before. She put a great name to it, and I'm really going to show you how you can use it to create kind of lovely designs. We're going to go from a single row of our Hubble stitch to doing a drop. This one here is 3-drop with 3 beads. We're going to be doing a 2-drop, 1 and then 2-drop, adding in some crystals. And then also I'm going to show how to use a multi-hold bead. So if you want to use something like a RounDuo Mini or a Super Duo, you can do so. I have here 2 8/0 seed beads, one in the Duracoat galvanized silver, one in the Duracoat matte seafoam. Both 8/0 Miyuki beads, 1.5 millimeter crystals, and these are the Potomac Rondelles, and then I have RounDuo Minis in the Jet Antique Chrome. I'm going to use some .006 wildfire beading thread, and I have that on a size 10 beading needle. I've added a stop bead to the end of about 5 feet of thread. Now I'm going to be doing this as an example piece and adding my clasp after. If you want to, leave about 10 or 12 inches of thread before the stop bead so you don't need to add any extra before adding your clasp. You're going to sew on 3 beads, and then I want you to sew back through bead number 1, starting close to the stop bead and going up through just bead number 1 that you added. What that does is creates a little bit of a Y, you want to think of it as. What we're going to do now is add a 4th bead to our unit. The 4th bead, we'll do the silver one, is going to sit between beads 1 and beads 2 that we strung. We're coming out bead number 1, we add bead number 4, and we sew down through bead number 2. I like to think of this as a foosball player. Thanks to Denise for that little word knowledge. And we're going to think about that as his bottom, these as his arms, and that as his head. You want to think about his arms kind of always sticking up and standing upwards up to the sky. We're going to do our second one here, writing 1, 2, and 3 beads. So unlike a right angle weave where we kind of catch on to the last one, we're creating a whole new unit. 3 beads get added on. I'm going to let them drop down next to the 3 that are already there, or the 4 rather. And again, I'm going to sew back up through bead number 1. Starting from this time my last unit and sewing up towards bead number 2. Coming out of bead number 1, just like a herringbone stitch, I'm going to add another bead, bead number 4, and sew down through bead number 2. So in herringbone stitch, you add 2 beads at a time. In Hubble stitch, you just add the 1. You can see they're kind of sitting there linked. If I let it turn, it's going to want to turn so that way some of the heads are to the bottom, some of the heads are to the top. We want to make sure that we're keeping all the heads of our little foosball players to the top and all of their arms, making sure that they're celebrating, yay, and they're blocking the ball. I'm going to do 3 more beads here. And again, let those fall down next to your first 2 units. So back through bead number 1 of those 3 that you just added. Get that nice tight kind of triangle there. Add the head to your foosball player. Sew down through his right arm, bead number 2. There we have 3 units of our right angle or of our Hubble stitch. We're going to do a 4th unit. I'm going to do mine 4 wide. Same deal, we're adding 3 of our matte seafoam, sewing back through bead number 1, starting towards the last unit. When I come up bead number 1 here, I'm going to just do a nice kind of tight grab to push that thread closer together. I'm going to add my head, bead number 4, sew down through bead number 2, and that makes my 4th little foosball player ready to go in a line. From here, we're going to step up to do our 2nd row of our 4 columns of our Hubble stitch. To do so, I'm going to go through bead number 3, because I'm coming out bead number 2. I'm going to go up through bead number 1 and step up through bead number 4. So I'm coming out on the exterior of my project. Coming out the exterior, or the head of our last little foosball guy, we're going to add 1, 2 more beads. We're going to go back through bead number 3. So we added beads 1 and 2. We're coming out bead 3, and we're going to go back into bead 3. We're going to sew into bead number 1 and come on out. When we come out bead number 1 there, we add bead number 4 and sew down through bead number 2. Next unit, 2 more beads go on, 1 and 2. The bead that's sitting, the head of the guy in 3rd place there, we're going to sew through him, going back towards our first unit in the 2nd row. That rounds that out. I'm going to sew back through bead number 1, right there, and out. Give a nice tight pull. Add bead number 4 to the unit and sew down bead number 2. Again, 1 and 2 beads get added. I'm going to pick up my 3rd bead, sewing back towards the last unit that I just finished. Go back through bead number 1 that we just added. Give a tight pull to tighten that up. Add your next head of your foosball player that's standing on the shoulders of another one. So basically the heads of our first row of our foosball players are becoming the legs of the 2nd row. Again, add 2 more. These are going to be our arms. We're sewing through the head of the first foosball player that we started with down below, which is now going to become his legs of the one that stands on top. Go into bead number 1, sew out of it, add your next head, and sew down bead number 2. Just like we did previously, we need to step up so that way we can keep going and keep adding on to our Hubble stitch. To step up, to be able to do our 3rd row of our stitch, we're going to go through bead number 3, back through bead number 1, and through bead number 4 at the same time. And that brings us up in a position ready to do our 3rd row. If you want to continue with this single row of the Hubble stitch, changing up colors and kind of having fun with the pattern, you can just stop here, repeat the video, and just keep going. What I'm going to do now is show you 2-drop Hubble stitch. So instead of just having 1 bead for each arm, right and left, we're going to add 2 beads for his right arm, 2 beads for his left arm. So to do this, we are going to add them, and this then is going to give me the opportunity to add in on the next round my RounDuo Minis. So coming out that last bead, I'm going to add his new right arms, which are going to be one of the crystals, and the 8-0 is going to be the right side. 8-0 crystal, that's the left side. So instead of adding 2 beads, I'm adding 4 beads. 1 and 2 units of 2. I'm going to sew back through my 3rd bead, just like I've been doing. And then I'm going to step up through the first 2 beads, which I'm going to call bead 1. That is 2-drop Hubble stitch. I'm using 2 drops or 2 beads to make that first stitch. I'm now going to pick up my RounDuo Mini, which is 2 holes, and just go through the first hole, and then down through bead side number 2. Coming out there, I'm going to repeat. So I'm adding my crystal and my 8-0, and another 8-0, and a crystal. So that's side 1, side 2. Now I'm going into number 3 in that trifecta. As I pull that tight and closer, I'm going to go back up through side number 1, which, because I'm doing 2-drop, is 2 beads. Give a nice tight pull. Tighten up all that thread, especially as you go in and use this bigger bead here. When you're at the top then of side number 1, add your RounDuo Mini and sew down side number 2. So it's just an extension of the exact same thing that you've learned in the first couple clips, but instead of doing 1 bead and 2 beads, you're doing 2 to each side. Repeating again, so back through side or bead number 3, go back through side number 1, which is 2 beads. As I do that, I'm going to pull nice and tight, making sure to tighten up any extra thread that may be showing. Coming out the top then between sides 1 and 2, I'm going to add my RounDuo Mini and go down side number 2. As you go down side number 2 now, you're ready to add your 4th and final set of this pattern. Crystal 8, 8 crystal. Sew through bead number 3. As you sew through bead number 3, sew back up through the right hand side, which is 2 beads because we're doing the 2 drop. And then as you tighten that up, you're going to add your last RounDuo Mini and sew down through bead side number 2. As you add that last RounDuo Mini, you're going to need to step up. We're going to go through bead number 3, just like we did as we added the previous step up. We're then going to step up through side or beads number 1, which is going to be those 2. And then instead of going through the first hole of your bead, of your RounDuo Mini that your thread is currently coming out of, we need our thread to come out towards the exterior. So what we're going to do is we are going to step up right away from the seed beads to the second hole of the RounDuo Mini and out. As we come out the RounDuo Mini, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to do 2 drop again. To do the 2 drop, I want you to do 8 crystal, crystal, 8, because we're going to be reversing so we get this pattern. I'm coming out of the bottom bead there. I'm going to add those 2 beads. So back into that bottom bead. I'm going to flip it in my hand. Don't get confused. I'm just flipping it to make it more comfortable to sew away from me. Go back up through the first beads on side number 1. As you go back up on side number 1 then, when you're coming out the top, we're going to switch back to our silver beads and go down through side number 2 and back to that single bead hubble. Coming out here again, I'm going to do 8 crystal, crystal, 8, because they're grouped up. There's side number 1, number 2, and now I'm going to sew on to side number 3, catching onto the second hole of the next RounDuo Mini. When we were doing it below, we were just catching onto that 1 silver bead. Coming out there, we're going to go back up through side number 1, which is going to be those 2 beads, the 8 and the crystal. Coming out, give a nice little tight pull, add your 8-0, and down through the side. So I'm going to continue the whole way now, adding in those 8-0s 3 and 4 times. Coming out the 8-0 then, I want you to do another rotation of crystal, 8, 8 crystal. Circling around, adding in your RounDuo Mini, sewing down crystal, 8, 8 crystal, back through, add another rotation and another RounDuo Mini. From here on, the pattern is going to be the exact same. So we get this nice pattern designed of our RounDuo Mini in 1 row, then our 8-0 seed beads. RounDuo Mini, 8-0 seed beads, and I'm going to continue the rest of the bracelet with this 2 drop of the Hubble stitch. At the end then, we'll switch back to the 1 drop in the regular Hubble, and then we'll attach our clasp. So you've learned how to do the single Hubble, the double, or the 2 drop, and then if you want to do a 3 drop, it's the same thing. So here's a 3 drop, 3 on the right, 3 on the left, going back and adding 1 bead in. You can see 2, 1, and 3 all used on this fun little pattern design. Go to town, have fun, and keep going and keep hubbling. As you continue and keep building rows and rows, whether or not you're doing just the regular Hubble or if you're doing the 2-drop or even using the addition of the multi-hold bead, you get this nice lace lineup that it has those nice V's that are created even in the single row. And you can really change up and play around with the different colors, making leaves. I've seen them that it's really, really pretty, and continue having fun with the Hubble stitch. As you build rows, you can change up the design idea too, go back to a single, go back to a triple, and really have fun along the bracelet. But you really end up with this beautiful lacy stitch and the lacy design that runs in a nice row along the edges. Once you have close to the desired length of your bracelet, if you want to, you can downgrade back into that regular Hubble stitch. So I'm going to go back in now, and what I'm going to do is downgrade, adding in 2 coming out of my last silver. I'm not going to add the crystals. I'm adding 2 of my matte seafoam, back up through bead number 1, add my silver, back down through bead number 2. So you can see how quick and easy it is to transition from that 2-drop back into this single regular Hubble stitch. So again, adding 2 more of my 8s, back up through bead number 1, add another top of my little foosball guy, and go back down through bead number 2. This will close off that row then. 2 beads go on, back through bead number 3 that's already there, up through bead number 1. You can see this gets to be like back when you're doing the single, kind of like speed beading. Once I have 2 rows of this on, I'll get ready to add on my clasp, which my clasp is a really nice 3-strand clasp garden clasp. The reason that I've chosen a 3-strand clasp is because as I'm choosing the 3-strand clasp with my 4 rows, I'm gonna have a nice opportunity with those 3 indentations there to go in and add in our fun clasp to the edge. So I have 1 more row to go, adding in to mimic the end. This one's gonna be all my turquoise color, and then we'll go in and add on our clasps. When you've finished up your last row of your Hubble stitch, I'm coming out, I've circled around, and I'm coming out through bead number 2. So I have 1 and 2 there, and then bead number 3, or sorry, I'm coming out bead number 1. What I have here is a 3-strand clasp garden clasp. Remember, I'm gonna grab onto the interior, basically, of these pieces. Now to do so, I'm coming out of that first bead. I'm gonna add a new bead, which is gonna sit basically between my 2 rows and connect them. Go up through my clasp, down through that same bead, and this is just my first time around. I'm gonna reinforce it since it's a heavy clasp. Pulling it close to the clasp, then I'm gonna go down through bead number 2 on my next row of my Hubble stitch. From here, I'm gonna circle around down through bead number 3, up through bead number 1 of that second row there. Add my next of my turquoise beads, go up through the edge, and the link of bead of the second strand of the clasp, down through that same bead, and then down through bead number 2 of the next row. So it's just kind of pulling that all together there. Down through bead number 3, up through bead number 1. And the reason I'm doing it this way is so it sits nice and even as I'm looking at the clasp. Well, of course I need 1 more bead, pour it out. Go up through the clasp. And now, like I said, this is my single strand going through the clasp end. I'm gonna go through and reinforce this 2 more times. Back through that same bead, and then down through bead number 2 on my first row there. Circling around through the end to reinforce, and both sides are gonna be the exact same. Back up through bead number 1, back through bead number 4. And coming out bead number 4, I'm going to kind of go underneath a bridge thread there so I can start this process again. Going up through the bead I just added, through the loops, back through the bead that was added, and down through bead number 1 on my next row of my Hubble stitch. So I'm going to repeat that process the whole way around, going over here, back through bead number 3, up through now bead number 2. So I'm basically doing just the exact same thing in the opposite direction. I'm going to do that one more time. Then I'm simply going to sew down my Hubble stitch and tie off my thread ends, burning them as is. And once I get the other side done, you can see this is a little bit big on me because of the clasp that I'm using. You can see how pretty this stitch is, whether or not you're wearing the clasp to the front or if you're wearing the clasp to the back. It's a really, really lovely lacy stitch that's easy to learn and easy to progress from. So I'm really excited to see all of the different varieties that you may have on the Hubble stitch if you post on our Facebook group. Thanks so much in joining me and learning the Hubble stitch. It was really a great fun stitch to show how to use, whether or not you're using it just the way it was designed, if you're doing 2-drop, 3-drop, adding in some multi-holed beads, and really making it your own. Thank you to Melanie de Miguel again for allowing me to do the video, as well as check out links below if you want to check out all of her Hubble stitch books that you can purchase from her online. And also have fun with the stitch. You can really make it your own, adding some beads to the side as you drop down from each edge, adding beads between the Hubble rows, and really kind of expanding your knowledge, trying out some new stitches, and exploring some new options. As always, thank you so much for joining. If you haven't yet, click that little subscribe button in the right-hand corner so you don't miss anything from us here at Potomac Beads. I'm really excited, and I know Melanie is as well, to see all of your creations in our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making. Thanks for joining me, and enjoy the Hubble.